Welcome to Antitrust Code by Concurrence. Concurrence is the leading antitrust database with over 30,000 articles on competition law. Concurrence is also the largest network of antitrust experts with lawyers, economists, enforcers, and academics in 85 countries. By listening to this podcast, you will learn the fundamentals of competition law and hear about the latest antitrust news thanks to our guests, the best experts in the antitrust world.
Hello and a very good day to you all. My name is Antonio Capobianco. I'm the Deputy Head of the OECD Competition Division, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this podcast on algorithms and collusion. It is organized together with Concurrence as part of the promotion of the Compendium of International Cartels, published by Concurrence earlier this year, which collects some of the most iconic background papers on international cartels that the OECD Competition Division has produced over the last 20 years, creating what we hope a key reference tool for academics, practitioners, and competition agencies alike. If you haven't yet had the chance to see the compendium, it includes 5 main chapters ranging from substantive to procedural issues, and there's also a chapter on international cooperation in cartel cases. It also includes the 3 OECD Council recommendations which are relevant to this enforcement area, the recommendation on effective action against alcohol cartels, the recommendation on fighting bid rigging in public procurement, and the recommendation on international cooperation in competition investigation and proceedings. Today we wanted to really dive a little deeper into one particular topic covered by the compendium, algorithmic competition, and more specifically focus on algorithms and collusion, a topic that the OECD discussed in 2017, and you will find, of course, the related background paper in the compendium. I mean, I don't have to emphasize too much reasons behind this choice of algorithmic collusion for the podcast. The topic is of high interest and high practical values, especially as algorithms are increasingly drawing the attention of enforcers from around the world, how they impact competition. Now, to help us with this topic, I'm really delighted to welcome Ariel Ezrachi. Ariel is the Slaughter and May Professor of Competition Law and a Fellow of Pembroke College in Oxford. He is very well known to all of you, and he is one of the most thoughtful international competition scholars. And I have to say, we owe him the credit to have raised first the alert on the risk for competition from an increased use of algorithms, especially pricing algorithms by firms. I think it was 2016 when you, Ariel, with Maurice Stuckey, published the book Virtual Competition, The Promise and Perils of Algorithm-Driven Economy. So, Ariel, welcome to the podcast. Maybe let me start with an observation that despite the fact that scholars like yourself and others and authorities have been sort of discussing the risk associated with pricing algorithms for the good part of the last 10 years, we have not seen much enforcement so far, especially outside the use of algorithms as facilitators of, I would say, the traditional anti-competitive price fixing arrangements. Maybe with one notable exception in more recent times, there have been hub and spoke schemes where a third-party intermediary, the hub, coordinates price policies of competitors using an algorithm, so competitors will be the spokes, through the use of the same pricing algorithms, or by developing, algorithmic pricing tools that are then used by a number of competitors with the aim of softening price competition. So, having thought about this topic for a long time, what are the reasons why we haven't seen much enforcement, and what do you see this most recent focus on hub and spoke arrangements?
Thank you for the question, Antonio, and again, really nice to join you to discuss these issues. So why we haven't seen enforcement has to do with the challenges that are associated with algorithmic collusion beyond the simple cartel that is facilitated with the use of an algorithm. The other scenarios that we raised, each and every one of them involve some complexity, either in detection or conceptual complexities. And I think competition agencies in general, when dealing with the digital economy, had probably bigger fish to fry. They focused a lot of resources on platforms, market power, possible other distortions. But with time, what we have seen is that, of course, what was maybe 10 years ago a bit of a novelty in some markets. Of course, what we see is proliferation of platforms and ecosystems, as well as dynamic pricing now becoming something that is central to the way most entities will price online. So we have a change in market dynamics, then we have a change in business models, because whereas in early years, those who could engage in dynamic pricing were those companies that possess the IT capacity and the knowledge. These days, you have third parties that offer dynamic pricing services. So we have increasingly third parties that would manage for you your pricing, can also manage your stock, can sometimes manage your strategy. And as well, we have platforms that as part of the services that they offer, for instance, for sellers on their interface, will offer similar services. So we have business models. And then the last thing, and probably one of the most crucial things, is that because there was limited enforcement action and there was an assumption by most actors on the market that therefore the activity is acceptable, the activity is public. There's no detection element. The issue was just for competition agencies to reach a stage where they appreciate that there is a problem with this type of dynamics and take possibly into account some of the concerns that we have raised before and others continue to raise. Now, where do we stand? I mean, the challenge here, of course, is that we're not talking about hub and spoke cartels. It's not a structured cartel, the traditional cartel. What we have is what we refer to as an incidental hub and spoke. I join a dynamic pricing service because I believe that that can improve my sales, profitability, efficiency, and you just happen to join the same provider, and someone else joins the same provider, and suddenly we find ourselves in a situation of an incidental hub and spoke. And the question is, how do we approach that? The case law is yet to fully frame the threshold for intervention and illegality. So in Europe, you have Ituras, you have the Spanish estate agents, you have some other cases, and you have ongoing investigations into some platforms, but there's no clear attempt to explore the theory and the dividing line. And in the US, there is a bit more activity, more at least more noise. You have RealPage that has made the headlines. You have the Las Vegas hotels that made the headlines. You have an appeal. You have the Department of Justice submitting their observations on how recommended prices that are fully integrated into your decision-making should be seen as illegal. And noticeably, since May this year, you also have a piece of legislation in California that codified the idea that the use of a single algorithm to determine pricing, even if it is based on public information, can be regarded as anti-competitive and illegal. Now, the question is, how do you approach it conceptually? Maybe just briefly, there are quite a lot of challenges here. What exactly do you condemn? Because the risk, of course, is that if you condemn every use of dynamic pricing, you might chill the market. So I think the difficulty sometimes is to identify, now that enforcement is starting to take place in various jurisdictions, for enforcers to have a bit more clarity of where is the dividing line between legality and illegality. Is it the use of a single algorithm, or is it the use of common information, or is it the use of confidential information? Is it because the algorithm optimizes for the totality of the spokes, or is it that as long as the algorithm optimizes every time for different spokes, then this is acceptable? Is the choice of various algorithms or various variables enough to say that you don't have a common algorithm, or anytime you use a single provider, you would raise concerns? Is it about object, or is it about effect? Is it about the level of market transparency? It is about level of adoption. Is it about there being a punishment mechanism? So it is much more complex once you look at it in detail. And so far, some of the cases may have either under or over intervened, depending on your viewpoint.
Yeah, clearly it's a complex area, and some of the questions that you raise are not is a different territory from what the competition authority
Absolutely, yeah.
are investigating the more traditional cartels. One question that we looked at when we studied algorithmic collusion years ago is this issue of the risk or increased risk of tacit collusion, something that you also looked at in your research. Because since I would say the early days of the awareness of the risk associated with the dissemination of pricing algorithms, I think at least the policy discussion focus on these risk of tacit collusion through autonomous learning by these complex pricing algorithms. We're thinking about deep learning algorithms, machine learning algorithms. We are moving, or we've already moved into the Gen AI world. Now, these are algorithms which may independently learn or conclude that collusion is the best outcome for the firm, and absent communication between competitors, there's no intent by the individual competitors to suppress competition. Now, after so many years, or say 10 years down the road from when you first raised this question, how do you see the debate? Is this still science fiction in terms of antitrust, or is it reality? Are we paying super competitive price because tacit collusion has become more common out there? And what to do about it, since tacit collusion is not illegal under traditional competition law. And I have to say, when we looked at this, we didn't have an answer to this. I mean, to these questions. So that's why I'm picking on your brain, if I can.
So of course, I mean, tacit collusion is a much more complicated problem as far as enforcement policy than hub and spoke. So I think with hub and spoke, we have some interesting questions that we raised, but all of them can be solved. In tacit collusion, the point you raise, I think, is a central point. After all, we accept conscious parallelism as something that can happen on the market, a rational reaction to market characteristics, and therefore we do not condemn conscious parallelism when it takes place with humans. The question that was raised is what happens when humans enhance their capacity to engage in tacit collusion, in conscious parallelism, and utilize algorithms. What they can do is they can stabilize the collusive agreement, not collusive in antitrust terms, collusive in economic terms. They can stabilize the interdependence, they can introduce better mechanism for monitoring, for punishment. And therefore, there was a very interesting question. I think I'll start with the reality check and just say that it's really, I mean, it's a fascinating area, but it's really important just to remember, algorithms cannot turn a market that is not susceptible to tacit collusion to a market that will suddenly have tacit collusion. So the question is narrow in the sense that it's only relevant to markets that have certain types of products, certain types of concentration. You need to have oligopolistic markets with barriers to entry, with ability to detect, ability to react to prices. And their algorithms can have more stability, or algorithms could maybe increase the numbers of participants and enable tacit collusion. But I think the first element is just to appreciate that tacit collusion from an economic perspective is not something that can happen in differentiated goods in very complicated market when you have secret deals. So the question is extremely interesting, but limited to certain types of markets. Now, on those markets, it's certainly possible, and you can see a certain assimilation. And it can happen either when entities appreciate the potential for interdependence and design algorithms that mirror the idea of retaliation. So they take something which is a market outcome, tacit collusion is a market outcome, and use it as a market strategy. So they computerize the whole notion there. And an even more interesting debate that is still ongoing is the extent to which AI models could do it independently, even if you as a player do not intend to do so. So on the first question, when you as a player when you do so, is it illegal? It's an open question. I mean, you're acting unilaterally as long as the law does not prohibit it, as long as your signaling is not something that moves into agreement or concerted practice or some sort of illicit collusion. Very hard to detect. When it comes to AI, it's even more fascinating because there's even no human intervention. And here we have some very interesting modeling by some groups that show that simple AIs can reach some sort of an alignment. But at the same time, you have others that challenge the possibility to truly reach a sustained tacit collusive price on the market. And it's an open debate. I think it will take more time. It is something that will take more time. But as we move more of our livelihood online, as you have more and more elements of pricing that are determined by algorithms, it is likely that you will have more opportunities for such alignment. And then all the questions that we have raised, that other people have raised, as to whether you have a different rule for humans and tacit collusion. If you do, what does it mean? I mean, how do you approach it in practice? All these elements become extremely important. So the moment I would say this is a viable debate, it is relevant at times. You do have some cases where this is relevant, but it is still at its, let's say, early stages.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting. And definitely also we found that there is not enough yet empirical evidence of the happening prices out there in the real world, and whether, pricing algorithms are actually colluding or not, we don't really know. The theory tells us that they might reach that conclusion, but we don't have enough empirical evidence yet. So maybe I do agree with you that the conversation will still go on. One thing we did, however, found out, at least we thought that maybe there is a difference between human interaction and algorithmic interaction when it comes to tacit collusion. And one thing is, because you said you need special characteristics, of course, to have sustainable tacit collusion. But one thing we thought that algorithms can transform markets that were not enough transparent for humans into transparent for algorithms. The ability to collect and organize information is much more precise and fast, and time. Action reaction between a price increase and an undercutting strategy is much more fast in an algorithmic world than would be.
Of course. So we covered that obviously in virtual competition in our article. So in that respect, of course, what you have is you don't leave any opportunity for arbitrage. You have faster detection. So there are lots of things that you can do, but you cannot change the fundamentals of a product. What is important to understand is, and I mentioned that because there have been some attempts to enforce that were completely detached from a market reality. And that's the point I was trying to make, that you just have to understand that it's not that algorithms can now take differentiated goods and suddenly you can argue for tacit collusion just because you have algorithms. They amplify a lot of the things that we can do as humans. They can do them better. They can facilitate. They avoid policing. They avoid monitoring. So a lot of efficiency measures, but there is a limit, and one should not assume that this is something that is going to dominate all markets. I think as a limiting principle, this is something that is quite important just to highlight.
Let me very quickly go back. You talked about challenges. We talked about challenges of enforcing competition law in this algorithmic environment. Just very quickly, if you ask competition authorities, most would tell you the laws as they are today are fit for purpose. We don't really need to change very much. Do you think that there is something that can be done? Do the agency need different skills, different tools, investigative tools? We need a change in the legal framework when it comes, for example, to questions like tacit collusion.
So in terms of detection, of course, some agencies already have very good IT capabilities. Others will need to develop them. Monitoring, testing, sandboxing. These are all challenges that are about detection and enforcement. It becomes even more challenging with AI because of the nature of kind of black box AI and the fact that it's very hard sometimes to understand what exactly has happened. So there is this element there that is the ability to detect. On the illegality, if agencies accept that tacit collusion is legal, then obviously there needs to be some sort of a change to create a different set that refers to automated tacit collusion. That is something that requires very careful consideration, because in a way you risk creating irrationality by demanding that algorithms are not involved and maybe taking our markets backwards by having certain actions where a human will have to be involved to avoid that. The way to resolve that is that some agencies focus on signaling or communications, and then it's not really a tacit collusion case. It becomes a collusion case.
Yes.
It maybe is powered by elements that are borrowed from a tacit collusion story, but it is really a case about humans that coordinated the utilization of similar algorithms that can align strategies. So on the legal side, there is certainly more work that needs to be done. If one would think that this is something that people would like to approach directly and really target algorithmic tacit collusion.
Totally agree with you. I wouldn't know how to design a different rule than the one we have to recover or include situations such as those you just described. Now, very, very quickly, a very final question, since I have you here. If you were to look back to when you and Maurice Stuckey started asking some of these sort of difficult and thorny questions, did you expect the policy debate and the enforcement practice to evolve this way 10 years down the road? Would you have expected a different outcome? And if I can just ask you, what's coming in the next 10 years? If you have to write a new book today, what would be the title, the scope of your book?
Well, I think we hoped for a faster approach in terms of enforcement. So in virtual competition, we had three big stories. We have collusion, we have platforms and abuse of dominance, and we have discriminatory pricing and discriminatory behavioral discrimination, manipulations, basically. And obviously platforms took off and you know, it's all around us in terms of enforcement. I think there is a lot of awareness now when it comes to targeting, harvesting data and discrimination. But on pricing, we always thought that it was odd that hub and spoke structures that are very clear and binding and singular were never approached by competition agencies. So that was somewhat surprising, but that's the nature of antitrust enforcement. I think if I had to look into the future, I would safely expect more hub and spoke cases to be out there. Hopefully hub and spoke cases that are balanced and do not move too much into harming the efficiency of some of these operations and just really try to avoid price alignment or try to avoid harm to consumers. I think there's going to be secondary tacit collusion cases where you have hub and spoke structures that are then benefiting also from tacit collusion, but that is a tacit collusion at the level of the operators, of the service providers. This is something that Maurice and I have recently covered in an article. So I think this will be the next manifestation of a combined hub and spoke and tacit collusion. And AI is likely to keep us busy. So I think that's also a safe bet for the next 10 years or so.
So it seems key that despite 10 years have gone by, we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, that's life.
As the world develops around us and the technology moves on, new questions and new issues will arise. Look, unfortunately, I need to bring this podcast to a close, but not before thanking you, Ariel, for your insight. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Antonio.
To everyone who's watching this, if you are interested, of course, in exploring further some of these fascinating questions, we encourage you to read Concurrences Compendium on International Cartels, and of course to explore the OECD website and go to the website of Ariel. I think that a lot of interesting research is done by Ariel and his colleagues. So thank you very much and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
You listened to an episode of Antitrust Code by Concurrence. If you want to read more about this topic, check the Concurrence website where you can find all relevant articles. Follow us on Twitter @CompetitionLaws and join the Concurrence group on LinkedIn to receive updates on our next podcast.